Hi everyone, welcome back to the Helen Olivia virtual workshops. My name is Lindsay. I am a designer at Helen Olivia and I'm excited to be leading this class for you. This class is our house style workshop, and what house style means is that it's our classic Helen Olivia style. So it's what we most commonly use for retail designs, what we do for a lot of event work, and things like that. So this is something familiar to you if you've seen our arrangements, if you've seen our Instagram. We have a signature style. It's very lush, kind of rounded, and that is what we're going to be looking for today when we're creating our designs. So what you're going to need to do is grab all of your materials and we will go ahead and jump right in. So you're going to need your bucket of balloons. Got all of our good stuff in there, and then you have a bag that you got, and in your bag will be a vase. We're using a 5-inch glass cylinder vase tonight, and what you're gonna do once you get your vase out is fill this up with water, and you want it to be as close to room temperature as possible. A little bit on the cooler side is fine, but nothing too warm because it'll cause the flowers to open up really quickly, which we don't want because we want a long vase life for your arrangement. I am going to be designing on a Lazy Susan, so I can easily rotate and show you. And the other things that you have in your bag is a piece of chicken wire, your formula sheet. So this tells you all the ingredients that we will be using, and I will point them out as we go. And the other thing we have in our bags are Vanda Orchid. So your Vanda Orchid is already in a water tube, so it's got its own water source, so you don't need to worry about setting that in water while you're waiting to put that in. We'll probably use this last in our arrangement. The next thing you're gonna need are your floral tools. I've got a pair of clippers and a floral knife with me today. If you don't have either of these, you can use a sharp paring knife from your kitchen. Nothing with a serrated edge. Smooth edge small kitchen knife will work. And if you're too scared of using a knife, then kitchen scissors that are sharp will work as well. So everything that we're doing, we're going to utilize our tools to make sharp angled cuts, so the flowers have ample space to drink from through the stem. So you'll hear me say that a lot as we go. The first thing we're going to do for our vase, once we've gotten it filled up with water, is leaf line it. So we like to use tea leaves here at Helen Olivia, and this is a tea leaf, and you are going to make this fit around your vase on the inside, so that way it covers all of our stems. So since I have a floral knife, I'm gonna trim this away. So if you have a knife, you can trim the hardy stem, and do not put your fingers behind it. If you don't have a knife, you can do the exact same thing and get the same result. Oh, and I actually have two. I'm not sure I'm gonna need both. But you can just rub the hard part of the stem against the edge of the table, and that will create some flexibility so we can easily wrap it without it bending or breaking. So you're gonna grab it on the edge of the table and really try to flex that out. And with a 5-inch cylinder, I'm probably gonna only need one. If you have two, that's totally fine. It's up to you whether you have the right amount of coverage. I'm gonna just use one. For a 5-inch cylinder, you're gonna need to trim this a little bit. So you can use scissors or a knife to trim this edge. So what you wanna do is have straight edges. So instead of the curve of the tea leaf that you see now, I'm gonna trim that and make that straight. And I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. And you want it to be enough inches high to cover the base. So I've got my tea leaf in, and mine is actually a little lower than my vase, but that is totally fine because we're gonna cover it up with hydrangea. If you wanna utilize your second one and cover any gaps inside, you can do the same thing and wrap it on the inside of that first leaf. I don't feel the need to use that, but it's totally up to you. The next thing you're gonna grab is your chicken wire. So with a piece like this, we've got our two smooth edges, and I like to roll those together so they're touching. Once you've got that cylindrical shape, you're going to tuck in those pointy edges. And you're gonna tuck them in quite tightly because we have a leaf in our vase and we don't want to snag it with the sharp edges of the wire. So make sure all of those sharp points are really tucked in until you get this smaller rounded cylinder shape. And once you've got that shape, I have the pointed sides between both of my hands, and I'm gonna squeeze it in a little bit so it's like a nice ball. And that is what we are gonna drop in our vase. And you never want the pointy sides of the chicken wire, that tangled part, facing upwards because it's gonna damage your stems when you're adding things to your arrangement. So you always want that open cage facing up at you. So gonna squeeze it to fit it in between the leaf without damaging it. And with a leaf line vase, you do kind of have to manipulate it a little more. And then once it's in there, you can spread it out with your fingers so that you have a nice open cage. You want to see a lot of different slots that you can stick your stems in. So once you've gotten your chicken wire in your vase, the first thing we're going to add is our mini green hydrangea. So since this is our house style class, this formula is going to follow what a lot of our retail arrangements look like. So this is something that I do day to day and make arrangements in this style all day, every day. So I'm gonna try to slow it down for you. But with our mini green hydrangea, you're gonna take that plastic off and you're gonna pop off any of the low-lying leaves. So anything that may fall into your vase, you're going to want to remove because it'll create rot in your vase and it will not allow your arrangement to have a long vase life. And we are all about that. So remove anything that might fall into the water. And then anything leaf-wise that's not hugging the head of the bloom, you're gonna wanna remove. If there's anything damaged or misshapen for hydrangea, you can just clip it right off and it won't hurt the integrity of the face of it. For mini green, I like to just cut up the vase into thirds and then put one on top in the center. So that's what I'm gonna do. Like I said before, we want sharp angled cuts for every single flower, and you want as much surface area open for the flower to drink from. So when you've got a 5-inch vase, you want to use your vase as a measuring tool, especially for those first few cuts so you really know how long to leave the stems. So there's my first one, and I'm gonna pop that in. And when your hydrangea is curved down like this, you're gonna rest that right on top of the vase. So you don't want any space between the hydrangea and the vase. So if it's lifted up like that, you're gonna need to trim it a little shorter and let it rest right on the vase. So same thing goes for the others. Pull that plastic off and pop off any of the leaves that might go below the water. And we are just gonna cut this vase into thirds with our mini green. So same thing for this third one, sharp angled cuts, and place here. And see how they're all touching the top of the vase. There's no gaps. This is what's creating our size and our structure for the arrangement. The mini green combined with the chicken wire creates a really strong base for everything. And with that central mini green, this is our fourth one, you want it to sit higher than these, but not too high because it's not a focal bloom. We want the other things that we've got in here to shine. So that's about how high I'm gonna put it. And for all of our arrangements we create, you can always cut something shorter, but you can't make it grow longer again. So just be mindful of that as we're going, that it's okay to keep something long and then take it out and recut it if you need to trim it down. But if it's too short and it starts sinking in your arrangement, it's probably not gonna be long enough to have the stem in the water. The next thing we're grabbing, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. The next thing we're going to grab is our greenery. So the greenery we have today is actually, no, I changed my mind. So we're gonna use our kale. So this is our green ornamental style kale, and it's beautiful, and you can do a couple things with this. You can leave it just as is, or you can flex these leaves out. And by doing that, you're gonna kind of pull down and then pop with your thumb. You're gonna press into the leaf, and you can flare the shape of it out a little bit more. This is totally personal preference. So if you don't like the look of it flared out, then you don't have to do that, but it is something that you can do to make it look like a beautiful bloom. So with the kale, you're gonna take your knife or clippers and you're gonna make a sharp angled cut with the kale. And I'm placing this now because the stem is so hardy. I don't wanna be fighting things later on. So right here, I've got kind of a big gap between my mini green, and I'm gonna pop that kale in right there. So we've got our kale in, and now that we have our kale in place, we are going to reach for our greeneries. So the greeneries we're using tonight are bush ivy and seeded eucalyptus. So these are probably the most common we use in the shop. Bush ivy definitely, and seeded eucalyptus in the fall is our other standard greenery we use. With things like bush ivy and seeded eucalyptus, there are ways to utilize a piece more than once. So for this one, I'm gonna cut that long piece off, but make sure that if you're splitting anything, that the stem that you're cutting is long enough to stand up in the vase. So if I were to cut this off, it wouldn't be long enough to go in the vase. So trim where you think you can split it, and I'm actually gonna cut some of these, some of the berries off, just because sometimes I think if you leave too many of them on, it can look a little scraggly, but sometimes they look really pretty. So it's totally up to you if you wanna leave those on or off. For this piece, since they're so tall compared to the greenery, I'm gonna pull them off. So you can just pull those right off. And with the bush ivy, I'm just placing it around the base. So I've got one tucked in here, one tucked in here, and then I'll probably tuck here and here. You really just want to cover all your bases with your greenery and make sure that you've got a little bit of greenery everywhere. So same thing with that piece. I was able to split that into 3 actually. So I've got this piece left that I'm going to tuck here. And I've got this piece where I'm going to pull off these berries, and I'm going to tuck that in between this kale and mini green. And we want to tuck everything kind of low and snug in between the mini green to fill out any of the gaps. And with the bush ivy, you're doing the same thing as everything else that we're going to be adding. You're gonna remove any of the leaves that might fall into the water. So a good way to figure out what's usable is to pinch everything up, and then you can see that you have a nice cluster of leaves there. And then anything that falls below that where you've pinched can be removed. So strip it from, excuse me, the stem. And this last piece I'm gonna tuck right there in between my mini green. And if you have all the little berries and you've placed your bush ivy and you think some of them look a little crazy, just give things a trim, and you can always do that later. So if you've placed everything and then once we get our flowers in, you still don't like the look of your berries, just trim them off or leave them. For seeded eucalyptus, same thing goes as the bush ivy, is you can kind of try to utilize this in a few different pieces. So right away, I'm gonna clip that because that is tall enough for my vase. And again, if it's not tall enough, don't cut it off. So right away, I'm gonna take that first piece and tuck it in on the side. And with seeded eucalyptus, it's very top heavy. So when you're, and I can split that right there, when you are putting it into your arrangement, it's going to hang out of the vase. So you want to make sure that you're cutting it short enough so that it's snug in the arrangement, but not too short where it's falling in. So I've got another piece that I'm going to use here, pulling off any of the low-lying leaves or seeds, and then trying to utilize this in as many pieces as possible. So right there, I've got another little piece, and again, we're just placing this around the vase. And when we're using more than one greenery, I like to start with one and then do the next. I never like to kind of mix what I'm doing, just because you get a more full look if you start with the bush ivy and then pop in something textural like the seeded eucalyptus. So see how I've got that pretty much all over my vase? I'm just taking my last usable piece. So this is usable because it's tall enough for the vase, but I have this other piece and this is too short to use in this. So I'm gonna set that aside and maybe we'll use it here for a boutonniere or something like that. And it'd be perfect if you have a little bud vase at your house. So once we've got our green up, which this is what we call a green up, is all of our green elements are in the vase. And now we are going to grab for our roses. So for our roses, we're gonna do all the dirty work first. So we're gonna clean all of our stems, remove all of our guard petals, and do that for all of them, and then we'll place them in the vase. This way that once we're grabbing them, we know they're ready to go in. So with the roses, we have our hot spots today, and we've also got purple moons. And right away, I'll show you that these purple moons have incredible thorns. So please, please, please be careful. The hot spots don't have as much, but if you're not wearing gloves like I'm not, be careful if you're stripping leaves like this, that you're watching out for thorns. So you can take off all of the leaves, and then any of the guard petals, which are damaged petals, and they're truly just protecting the integrity of the inside of the rose. And anytime you pop off those guard petals, it's not gonna hurt the inside of the flower. It's just helping it look more pristine. So anywhere there's damage or something that is falling off or something, just pull that off. And that is a cleaned rose ready to go in the arrangement. So we're gonna do that with all of our roses. So just use your judgment based on what you think looks damaged or not. And sometimes, you know, there's only a couple you have to pop off. Some you have to do a couple of layers. It really depends on the rose, how it was packaged, and how much damage there was during transit. So just cleaning all of those down. And now that we're on our purple moons, I will show you how to remove the thorns. So since these are big, scary thorns, these are actually easy to pop off with your thumb. So you're gonna hold the stem, press with your thumb, and they will pop right off. Oh, like that. So that is one way to remove the thorns. Another way is to use a knife and cut them off. So you want to always do this away from you, and you're just going to give the stem a light trim on the outside and remove those thorns. Same thing goes for putting your stem on the table and using your knife to go down and trim those thorns off. Never ever do it towards you, just in case you're using a knife. Another way you can do it is just clip the thorns off with your clippers. So there's a few ways. And with the purple moons, I'm gonna remove the guard petals as well. And we're gonna keep these roses nice and tight. And you can feel how healthy the roses are by squeezing them at the bottom if they're really firm. So these are great roses, and they should have a pretty long vase life. So same thing with the rest of your purple moons. You're going to remove any of the damaged guard petals, any of the thorns, pop them off. And these, as they open, they start to become a really pretty mauve-y tone. They have kind of a brownish neutral center, which is really, really pretty, especially in the fall. But they're a very interesting rose. So same thing with the last few purple moons. We're removing any damaged petals, and if you see me blowing on them at all, that just helps open up the center of the rose a little bit. Totally don't have to do that. So last, I think that's my last one. Last purple moon, removing those guard petals, and now we're gonna place things. So what I like to do with our roses are groupings of 3. In our house style arrangements, I tend to build with triangles of roses, if you will, and that looks appealing to the eye. And when you've got 2 styles of rose, you're going to want to mix your trios. So I'm going to do a trio, 2 purple moons, a hot spot, 2 purple moons, a hot spot, and 2 purple moons, a hot spot. So you can separate them so you're ready to go. And then we're going to place our roses. So with our roses, use your vase as a measuring tool. You want your stems to go as far to the bottom as they possibly can. And then we're gonna place our trios. So right away, I'm gonna do one here next to the kale. So I've got one low, and then I'm gonna go one high, because we never like to stack our roses directly on top or directly to the side, because we don't want them to look like a pair of eyes or a snowman. So we've got our 2 placed and we've staggered them, as you can see there. And then we're going to place our 3rd hot spot, sharp angled cut, and the hot spot on top. And as you're placing, you don't want to place straight down. You don't want to place really straight across. You want to place at an angle towards the center of the vase, because that's how your stems are going to keep everything secure, is when they're starting to crisscross in the vase. So now that we've got our first trio placed, as you can see, I'm going to move on to this next area. So when I'm doing a house style arrangement like this for retail purposes, etc., I like to build by placing a trio, and a trio as I go around the vase. And another thing is, when you're placing your roses, since I've got a hot spot up high here, I'm going to place one low on this side. So I've got low, and then I'm going to go in with my 2 purple moons above the hot spot, angle them in nicely, and that is your next trio. So, and I'm just adjusting the placement of one. You can always adjust, and if something's too long, like this I think is a little too long, I'm gonna trim it. And there's our next. And then right here between these last 2 mini green is where our last trio is gonna go. So we are going to place our purple moon low. Sorry, it's hard to see. Right above our mini green. And then we're gonna place, I'm gonna do my other purple moon right next to it. Not directly, but maybe a little lower and staggered. Like that. And then our hot spot is gonna fill in that gap up here. So hot spot, using your vase as a measuring tool always. And then that is our last rose. So now that we have our roses in and our kale in and all of our greenery, we are going to put in our spray roses. So spray roses, you do the same thing as a rose, except for you do it multiple times. So be careful of the little thorns on these, but you're gonna remove any of those low-lying leaves and then any guard petals on the spray roses that look damaged. And if you like the look of them as they are, then leave them, but pull off anything that's damaged. And these spray roses that we're using tonight are called Gem Stars, and I love them. They're so pretty. So same thing with every one, it's just repetitive. And once you've gotten them cleaned, set them to the side, and then I will instruct you how to place them. So with something like this, unfortunately, anything that falls too far below is not going to be usable in this style arrangement because we do want it rounded and lush. So I'm going to actually pop off these little shorter ones. As you can see, I love making a mess when I'm designing. And same thing with this last one, pulling off any sort of damaged petals, and then we're gonna place these in the vase to add to our design. And we've got really pretty purples and pinks going into this, and it's gonna be lovely. It's like the perfect transition to fall is jewel tones, I think. So now that we've got our gem stars prepped, we're gonna place them. So these are basically gonna fill in between our roses. So right away, I'm gonna place one here. Again, use your vase as a measuring tool. You want it to go across the vase and close to the bottom as possible. So for that one, I'm placing there. The next one, I'm going to place up high near this mini green and above my purple moons because I want to create that rounded shape. So anywhere I feel like there's a little gap, I'm going to fill in. And then, then for our last one, I am going to place it over here near our kale because I want to break up the greenery. And again, with this kind of arrangement, I'm not going to use that one just because it is falling lower. If you like the look of it a little more staggered, that is totally fine. This is just probably what I would typically do for a house style arrangement. You really want that low lush look, and that is how you achieve it by. So there we go. So that is all of our roses. And now that that's placed, we can put in our ranunculus. So we've got these gorgeous plum ranunculus today. And once we pull these out, you can see that mine are kind of frilled. I'm gonna leave it like that because I think it looks pretty. But if you wanna clean up the look of your ranunculus, you can pop off petals, but only from the back. And you need to be very delicate when you do so because you want to keep the integrity of the base of the bloom together because ranunculus can crumble if any of this part starts to get pulled off. So if you're pulling off anything, be really, really gentle and careful with ranunculus. So I'm gonna keep these stems a little longer than everything else because I want them to be able to float out above everything. So since we've got two, I'm going to place them on opposite sides. So I've got one that I placed here, and then since I've got the one there, and I'm just giving some of my greenery a trim as I'm looking at things, and then since we've got a second one, we're going to pull off any of these leaves, any of these stems that are stuck on. If you have a bud that's attached to it, you're totally fine to utilize that. You can even use it separately. But if it's too short where it won't be seen in the arrangement or it's sticking up too tall, you can totally cut it off. The next one I'm going to place on the opposite side. And be careful with your stem because ranunculus stems can bend really easily. Okay, And then we are really, as we go now, just filling in any sort of holes or gaps. So now that our ranunculus is in, 1, 2, beautiful. And now we're gonna grab our thistle. Thistle, this is our blue dynamite thistle, which is the dynamite variety. It is my favorite blue color that you can find naturally in flowers. It's this gorgeous denim. For something like this, again, I'm gonna try to utilize this in 2 ways because I want to, actually it might be long enough. I want to use this twice. So for this one, since I've got an offshoot here, I'm gonna cut right there. So I've got the offshoot on a long stem, and then I've got this piece of 3. With this piece of 3, I'm removing any of the leaves, and then I'm cutting this middle one out, sad, but he's not gonna be seen in the arrangement. So once you've got that cut, we're going to place our thistle in our arrangement. So the thistle kind of just breaks up the purples and it's giving us a little blue accent. And since I've only got 3 usable pieces, I'm gonna pop the 2 right there, and then I'm gonna tuck 1 over here between the kale and the purple moons that I have, like that. Here you go. And we're getting close to the end. The last, second to last thing that we're going to add is our purple clematis. This is gotta be top 5 flowers for me. I love it. It makes everything look gardeny. It's really pretty, perfect lavender color. With a stem like this, you can use it twice. For me, I'm not gonna get any blooms twice because my offshoot up here is too small. So if I were to cut that right there, I would lose these blooms because that's not long enough to put in a 5-inch cylinder base. But I can cut down here and utilize this greenery. Clematis has really pretty leaves, so I'm gonna utilize these leaves, and then I'm gonna use this piece, which has the 4 pretty blooms. So I'm gonna pull off these leaves because they're probably gonna get lost in the arrangement. And then I'm gonna place this piece first. I am sticking this right here by our thistle, and it's got really pretty floaty leaves. If you don't like the look of the leaves, you can trim them off. I'll just trim 1 to show you. And then I've got my second piece that I'm going to tuck in on the opposite side. And then we've got our next piece of clematis, and this one you can split perfectly in the middle, so you can use it twice. So I'm gonna cut that there, and I'll be able to use this because it's long enough to use in the bottom of the vase at the 5-inch cylinder height. And then I'm gonna utilize this piece as well. So cut these, take off any of the leaves that might end up in the water. And then since we've got 1 big piece here, I'm gonna do something here. So we really, with our house style, try to disperse elements everywhere around the vase pretty evenly. So when you're looking at it from all sides, you want it to be beautiful. So that is my second clematis bloom piece. And then I've got this last piece, and I'm gonna pop these off. And since this is shorter, I'm going to use it closer to my vase line, so low between these hydrangeas. So that is where I'm gonna tuck my last piece of clematis. And so now that that's in, this leaf is bothering me, so I'm gonna trim it. This is when you should take a good look at your arrangement from all sides and trim or adjust anything that you're not liking the look of. If you've got bush ivy berries that are driving you wild, then pull anything. This is what we do for every arrangement that we make. We want to lay eyes on it from all angles and make sure that it looks good every side. So the last thing that we're gonna add is our Vanda orchid that we've got, these gorgeous purple Vandas. And we are gonna pop this in where we have kind of a hole. And I'm actually gonna do it right on the top because I've got mini green and kind of nothing right next to it. So I'm gonna utilize the Vanda orchid to kind of disguise my mini green. And I'm gonna actually pop it in lower because I want you to be able to see it, but I'm gonna put it up high near my mini green. There. So that's the Vanda orchid. Everything else is in, and this is our house style arrangement. It's very rounded, low, lush, still a bit of garden element because we've used different kinds of greenery and different elements. So it's always beautiful. This is our classic style. This is what we love to do, and we do day in and day out. So thank you so much for joining. I hope you enjoy your arrangements, and please be sure to give them fresh water every single day. You can either check the water level and top it off, but every day I would say look at the water and see if it's sludgy at all. If it starts to brown, then you can run this under the faucet until the old water leaves and the new water comes in. So please take care of your arrangement. It's easy to see with the leaf-lined glass where your water level is. So once you see that water level drop, just top it off with some fresh water and it should be happy. So I hope you enjoyed this class. Thank you so much for joining our workshops. We love having you all, and we will see you next time.